to News at 6 with Jim Jensen, Rollins Smith, Warner Wolf on sports, and Dr. Frank Field with weather.
Good evening. As officials in states from New York to California pulled Tylenol capsules off shelves today, the company that manufactures the drug took its own action. Johnson & Johnson is now offering a $100,000 reward for the arrest and conviction of those responsible for spiking Tylenol capsules with deadly cyanide poisoning.
We have expanded team coverage this evening of today's developments, including a live report from the Food and Drug Administration in Washington. To begin with, Anthony Mason, who's been following the developments in Westchester all day long and has this live report. Anthony.
Roland, investigators who began yesterday with one Tylenol contamination case suddenly have two. Two cases, two sets of evidence, which strangely somehow seem to both connect with each other and to conflict with each other. Investigators confirmed today that the cyanide found in Tylenol capsules at this Bronxville Woolworths last night matches the cyanide found in the pills which killed Diane Ellsroth last Saturday.
It appears to be the same, chemically the same.
The second contaminated bottle was one of thousands confiscated from store shelves in a square-mile area of Bronxville after Miss Ellsroth's death last Saturday. Police discovered the cyanide contamination in laboratory tests. Westchester County investigators say the latest evidence has put them no closer to a solution, but that Miss Ellsroth's former fiancé and his family, who have been very cooperative, have now all but been eliminated as suspects.
It seems to me the focus would probably, in all likelihood, shift to the contamination of the pills occurring sometime during the manufacturing process.
Johnson & Johnson, the makers of Tylenol, point out that the lot numbers on the bottles indicate the first was made at the company's plant in White Marsh, Pennsylvania, while the second was made at a plant in Puerto Rico. But Westchester County DA Carl Vergare believes the second bottle of contaminated capsules could have been made in the same place as the first.
I'm told that while it did carry a Puerto Rico lot number, it's entirely possible, we cannot exclude the possibility that the second Woolworth bottle was manufactured in Pennsylvania.
Investigators were briefly sidetracked when three suspects arrested in another case were found with a copy of an extortion letter addressed to the Bronxville Police Department. The letter demanded $2 million to halt the Tylenol tamperings, but investigators are convinced the group had nothing to do with the poisonings. In Bronxville itself today, Woolworths was open again, but the store manager was reportedly away, being questioned by authorities. While on the streets, the people of Bronxville worried about both their health.
It's really upsetting because you go to a store, you have faith in the products you buy, and turn out that you hear people die innocently.
I would not buy Tylenol, period.
And their reputation.
We like to think Bronxville is a lovely village, very close to New York, and a lot of awfully nice people live here. And here we are, the focus of worldwide attention as a place that's harboring poisoned capsules.
For investigators now, much will depend on the Food and Drug Administration's test on the remaining Tylenol samples that were taken from that area, or from this area, rather. For more on those now, let's go live via satellite to Betsy Ashton in Washington. Betsy.
Linguistics, check out the mystics. We're fantastic. You mean fantastic? Fuck it, you'll get your ass kicked. Challenge my verbal gymnastics. Acrobatics, vocabulary calisthenics. Can understand the mathematics are esoteric. Watch the style, but also peep the lyrics. My lightning, my thunder. Way back, I stomped out Hercules. But now I stomp out MCs. Can't chill because the sun don't freeze. Heavy metal, hard like titanium. Alchemists, I turn wax into platinum. Influential, scientific power. My mental violence will shower, devour at a crazy rate. I'm speeding through your circuits and I'm perforating data banks. Stamina in the brain is how I slay it. I enforce my course and I always must obey it. Endorse it, essential rhyming remedies against any man at arms that could get with you. Eternal, internal, alchemist. I spill logic and science ever since. Throwing cerebral blows without my fists. Poisonous, taoist. Don't mess with toys in this racket. Terrorists don't proceed to hijack it. It's too perverted, you heard it, so now you get murdered. Test the sound system, it throws off your equilibrium. Deep concentration can fracture the meditation. Competition is flipped on at random. Deviant monks attack the mic as mental pandemonium. And then some, you go for your handgun. Psychokinetic forces proceed to smash in your cerebellum. Phonetician with more stamina than a Christian. My mind C3H5 and 309 like nitroglycerin. I bust as awful rock bus and meet Cerebus.
Ready, ridiculous rabbitry as I commence. I whirlwind through cities, breaking down substances, combining matter. Test my hand skills and backbone splatter. Rough and tough, although the mental will stomp ya. Pugilism, electrocute like Blanca. Collaborate all my words into verses. I instill the will without even curses. Slurs, escapade off the beat. Totally complete with the unique physique. Microcosmic warrior, indeed I'll destroy ya. And it's Mike, I'm taking over.
She stands accused of a shocking crime, and now the woman accused of killing her 2 young sons faces death threats and the death penalty. Susan Smith goes to trial. Good evening, I'm Kathleen Layton.
And I'm Keith Ranford. Our top story tonight, if you follow the story from its mysterious beginning to its tragic end, you remember Susan Smith. She is a South Carolina mother who accused a stranger of carjacking her and kidnapping her 2 young sons. Later, Smith buckled and admitted to drowning the little boys in a nearby lake. Smith was last seen at her home shortly before 5:30 on October 25th. She decided to drive around town, and then she was allegedly carjacked at a stoplight. In fact, she confessed later to driving 7 miles up the road to a lake. We go now live to South Carolina.
It's been a long day for the many people inside and outside the courthouse. This trial is charged with emotion, and with no cameras allowed, often we wait and wonder to see how far along the jury selection process is taking, or whether Susan Smith is competent to stand trial. 147 jurors came in buses to the Union County Courthouse this morning, where 23-year-old Susan Smith stands accused of drowning her 2 young sons last fall. Her ex-husband, David Smith, came to court wearing pictures of his sons and says he wants Susan to die for the crimes she confesses. Of the jurors already excused, 14 men and 1 woman were allowed to go simply because they've committed crimes in the past. Jury selection will move along until 12 are seated. Attorneys speculate that could take at least 2 weeks. This woman's husband could end up serving.
His attitude is that someone has to do this, and if he's chosen, then he'll assume that responsibility.
How do you feel about him doing it? Would you want to be in his shoes?
No, not really, but I pray that he will have the guidance from above to do what's best for all concerned.
Smith came to court this morning dressed as she has for the past 6 months, but at her attorney's side in the courtroom, she wore a conservative blue suit. Dozens of townspeople jockeyed for a seat in the crowded courtroom, trying to see for themselves how this real-life drama is unfolding.
This is so personal to us, living here, and I just want to get a sense of what it's all about, what her motives were, and why she did such a terrible thing.
That man, Roger Wade, and many others have actually taken time off from work to be first-hand spectators in the case. At this hour, the remaining potential jurors, all attorneys, and Susan Smith herself remain inside the courtroom. In Union, South Carolina, I'm Susan Christensen. Now back to you.
All right, Susan, thanks for the story.
Now, one of our newest staff members at Eyewitness News has a unique connection to the Susan Smith case, and you will see it only on 7. Reporter Cynthia Barnes conducted the first interview with Smith the night she said she was carjacked, and she recently won an Emmy Award for that story. Cynthia, take us back to the night you talked to Susan Smith.
Well, Kathleen, I was working for a CBS station in Spartanburg, South Carolina when I met Smith. I talked with her at her parents' house the night she said she was carjacked at gunpoint. I went to her parents' house in October of last year. She was there with her estranged husband, David. Smith says she was driving down the street when she came to a traffic light, and that's when she says she was carjacked.
Okay, I was stopped at a red light, and just out of nowhere, this black guy came up and we just opened the door and jumped in the car, and he had a gun, and he had it pointed in my side and told me to drive, and so I did. And when I tried to ask him why he was doing this or whatever, he just told me to shut up or he'd kill me.
And later you see the video there of officers searching the area around John D. Long Lake. Sheriff Howard Wells, he rushed to the scene that night, and in fact, he was the one who actually filed the police report. I'll have more tonight at 6 o'clock on Susan Smith's plea for her children for their safe return, and also an interview with David Smith that night. Kathleen?
Cynthia, I'm sure you've thought about this many, many times since you did that interview. Did you feel that she was anything but sincere the night you spoke with her?
I wanted to believe that she was sincere, Kathleen, that night. I did speak with her on October 26th. Really, it was in the early morning hours of the 26th. But I did have, if you will, reporter intuition. I wondered if the story really washed. And of course, now we know that Susan Smith has confessed. And of course, you know, she will go to trial, and then we will decide if they'll decide if she's guilty or innocent. But I did think that something was a little fishy about the story, but as a journalist, that was not my call.
Okay, thanks, Cynthia. We'll look forward to your report at 6. Keith.
Another double murder trial capturing national attention, of course, is the O.J. Simpson trial in California. Today, Simpson's defense team began to present its arguments, and its first witness, Simpson's adult daughter, 25-year-old Arnell, took the stand today in defense of her father. Eyewitness News reporter Jerry Giordano is in Los Angeles again tonight covering this trial for us. He joins us now live with an update. Jerry?
Keith, it's hard to believe that it has been more than 1 year since O.J. Simpson was accused of the brutal murders of his ex-wife Nicole and her friend Ronald Goldman. Today, his side of the story began unfolding inside Judge Lancito's courtroom, and the first witness to come to the defense of the accused was also the defense's firstborn child.
I was born the same day my dad won the Heisman Trophy.
O.J. Simpson's daughter from his first wife, Marguerite, went on to contradict many of the images of her father that the prosecution spent the past 5 months trying to build. Arnell Simpson described O.J. as a caring man who was shocked at the death of his ex-wife.
Upset, out of control, distraught, emotional.
Had you ever in your life ever heard him like that before?
No.
And she went on to paint the accused in sharp contrast to the jealous murderer the prosecution has tried to portray. Defense attorney Johnny Cochran used the witness to back up several defense theories. The first, that Simpson's blood was planted at his Brentwood estate.
Did you ever see blood spots in the foyer area of that residence?
No.
You were out and around the driveway area that day, were you?
Yes.
Did you ever see blood spots in the driveway area?
No.
Arnell also denied ever seeing her father wear a dark blue jogging suit, the clothing it is believed the killer wore. And in an attempt to explain why Simpson was running late on his way to the airport around the time of the murders, Arnell told the court O.J. was the family procrastinator.
I would always prepare an hour before, and he'll get dressed in the last 15 minutes before we would have to leave. He's done this for years.
That's something that you've seen as you were growing up?
Yes.
And it is pretty clear where the defense is going. They are trying to rebunk or refute every one of the images that the prosecution has portrayed of O.J. Simpson's trial began some 5 months ago. Whether they will be successful remains to be seen. What we do know is that Arnell Simpson is the first of some 33 witnesses the defense plans to call. Many of them are being fought by the prosecution, so we'll have to see exactly how many of those 33 witnesses actually make it to the witness stand. I'm Jerry Giordano reporting live in Los Angeles. Back to you in Buffalo.
Jerry, the wires are saying tonight that probably the first dozen or so witnesses called by the defense are going to try and paint the picture. They're friends of O.J. Simpson, painting him as a loving, caring person who was very upset and emotional the night he found out about the murders.
Well, what they're trying to do here, I think, is debunk what the prosecution was able to get out of some of the police officers, that O.J. Simpson did not seem upset the night his wife was killed, didn't even ask why or how she'd been murdered. I think what they're trying to do here is establish the fact that he was upset, perhaps in a state of shock. We'll have to see how that plays out.
All right, good. Thanks, Jerry. We'll see you again later. Allegations of mismanaged money and convicted managers are overshadowing the foundation, which now bears the name of Nicole Brown Simpson. The charitable organization is said to have raised over $200,000 since its inception. However, that money has yet to be distributed to combat domestic violence. Also, the president of the Nicole Brown Simpson Charitable Foundation is not helping matters too much, apparently. According to the Los Angeles Times today, Jeff Nobel is a convicted felon and an accused wife beater as well. Nicole's father, who now heads the organization, admits that their work has come to a standstill right now. Lou Brown attributes all of these problems to growing pains. Kathleen?
President Clinton is revisiting a familiar theme with a family message today in Tennessee. He and Vice President Al Gore attended a family values conference. The president spoke about the ongoing debate over sex and violence in Washington on television. Mr. Clinton said a telecommunications bill pending on Capitol Hill should include a new computer chip that allows parents to screen objectionable programs.
This is not censorship. This is parental responsibility. This is giving parents the same access to technology that is coming into your home to all the people who live there who turn it on.
The TV Guardian the president is pushing works like this. An infrared remote control programs the TV Guardian box. The TV locks into the Guardian box and the box plugs into an electrical socket. A microprocessor and a clock work as a timer. Parents can set viewing hours and the box cuts off the power supply at a given time. If the government starts a rating system, codes will come from the TV. Guardian reads the codes and blocks certain rated shows by cutting off the power supply.
I'd do it in a second. The fans will dig it. They've waited long enough. I've just got to get the other lads to agree. I think I can convince them. I'll say, lads, the time has come to eat our pizza crust first.
Good idea, Ringo.
Yeah.
Stuffed crust pizza from Pizza Hut with cheese baked into a new, thinner crust. You'll want to eat it crust first. Now with free garlic dipping sauce.
Wrong, lads.
Large, just $9.99.
Never again. I'll never go back to hydrocortisone for my dry skin itch. I switched to Lanacaine.
New medical testing on itch nerve shows the direct action of Lanacaine relieves itching faster and keeps working better than hydrocortisone. Look, in the first crucial minute, Lanacaine gave faster itch relief.
And the relief really lasts.
Over time, Lanacaine kept working better.
Fast relief that lasts. I like that.
Lanacaine not only relieves itching faster, it keeps working better than hydrocortisone.
Okay, Mom, let's go. All by myself, all by myself?
Darien Lake, the fun you keep coming back to.
All by myself, with Mom.
Have you ever heard the wolf cry to the blue corn moon? Or ask
At Burger King, everyone's singing the praises of Disney's Pocahontas, filled with action, music, and romance. And they're really into the Pocahontas glasses at Burger King. Just 99 cents each, with any value meal. Each one with a memorable scene from the movie. You've got to get all four. You might even want to use them to drink from. 99-cent Pocahontas glasses, only at Burger King. Get your burger's worth.
After weeks of testimony aimed at proving he's guilty of murder, O.J. Simpson's defense team is finally presenting its case. The first witness, Simpson's daughter, Arnell. Ms. Simpson says she moved to her father's estate after finishing college. Defense attorney Johnny Cochran today asked her about why her father might not have been ready when a limo picked him up on the night of the murders.
He would usually do everything last minute.
You've seen this yourself?
Yes.
And describe that, doing things last minute.
Well, there's always been an ongoing joke within the family that we'd always say, Dad, you have to get ready. And he'd always say, I'll get ready before you will be. And I would always prepare an hour before, and he'll get dressed in the last 15 minutes before we would have to leave. He's done this for years.
Arnell says she began to cry when the detectives told her Nicole had been murdered. She says she talked to her father on the telephone and he was more upset than she had ever heard him. Jury selection got underway today in Union, South Carolina for the murder trial of Susan Smith. She's charged with drowning her two young sons last October. Officials started questioning a pool of about 170 potential jurors. They hope to narrow it down to the final 12 by week's end. A competency hearing for Smith was also held today to assure that she understands the proceedings and can assist in her own defense.
In Toronto, Paul Bernardo's trial adjourned early today so a jury member could attend his mother's funeral. Carla Homolka has been undergoing cross-examination by Bernardo's attorney, and she will likely face more questions tomorrow about her role in the sexual assault and death of 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey. Bernardo is charged with killing Mahaffey and 15-year-old Kristen French. In Cloverdale, California, the trial is now set to begin tomorrow for the man accused in the death of 12-year-old Polly Kloss. Richard Davis told police that he was in a drug-induced haze when he kidnapped the girl from her own bedroom in Petaluma, California, back in 1993. Police say Davis strangled the girl to try and cover his tracks. Davis finally led police to her body. Thousands of people joined in a search that received nationwide publicity. Davis could get the death penalty if he is convicted.
When Patrick DeStaffen was convicted for molesting children in his Rochester neighborhood, parents were relieved. This weekend, they planned a block party to celebrate his imprisonment. But celebration turned to disappointment when DeStaffen disappeared. And despite the manhunt going on around them, the party went on anyway. Karen Hepp reports.
Most of these children haven't played outside for days, and most of their parents haven't slept.
Hello. You do have that. All right.
Parents planned this block party to celebrate Patrick DeStaffen being behind bars and away from their children. Although that didn't happen, parents still feel their kids needed the release. Neighbor Jody Lysak was away on vacation. She didn't know about DeStaffen's escape.
I was shocked. I was very upset. On Wednesday, I was toasting his imprisonment, and to come home and find a flood of messages, I was very aggravated and very angry.
But Pat is upset about the party. Her 14-year-old son was one of DeStaffen's victims. She thinks this block party is absurd.
Why? Why? Why are we celebrating when, you know, we should be looking for this guy? There's nothing to be celebrating.
But not all of the parents feel that way.
For every step that he takes outside his house, that's every step more that we have to watch our kids.
The party is as much for the parents as it is for the kids. They too share a common bond now.
We have to talk to him about it. He has questions about sex that we've talked to him about, which at the age that he's at, he shouldn't have to know all this stuff.
What's so hard for these people is understanding why Patrick DeStaffen is running free when their children are still being held prisoners. Karen Hepp.
The preliminary testing is taking place in the FDA's Brooklyn laboratories. Any suspect bottles are being flown to cyanide experts in Cincinnati for further investigation. Those experts worked all last night on the capsules taken from the second bottle, the one from the Bronxville Woolworth store. They found the poison in that bottle identical to the poison that killed Diane Ellsroth.
Well, I think it indicates certainly that there's a common source to the potassium cyanide used here. They're both 90% and they have the same properties. They have the same chemical fingerprint, if you would.
The government is checking to see if the two bottles might have come together at some distribution point, in some warehouse where some employee might have tampered with them. But officials here tell me they think that's unlikely. They still consider this a local event, that the bottles were picked off the shelves, opened, poisoned, and resealed in Westchester County. Still the big question, how could someone poison 5 capsules, then reseal the bottle to match Tylenol's triple seal process? The FDA thought Johnson & Johnson had one of the best tamper-proof packages in the country, but tamper-resistant it is, obviously not tamper-proof. In the meantime, anyone who recently purchased Tylenol capsules in Westchester County is being asked to perhaps look at them. Certainly don't take those capsules, but look at them. If you see a capsule where the printing is out of line, where Tylenol doesn't go straight through but is out of line, or perhaps where there is brown material in the white section of the capsule, contact the FDA regional office or take the capsules back to the store. But the FDA would like to see a jar like that. The FDA offices will be open all through this weekend. And now for word on the latest of what the manufacturer had to say, we're going to go live to Roseanne Coletti, who is at Johnson & Johnson headquarters in New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Well, Betsy, the manufacturer says $100,000. That's a reward that Johnson & Johnson is offering to anyone who can provide information leading to the solution of this baffling case. People with information are asked to call the following FBI toll-free number, 1-800-334-2344. Now, on the questions raised by investigators today that perhaps the 2 bottles were actually both manufactured in Pennsylvania, Johnson & Johnson officials say absolutely not, because the lot numbers are put on at the individual factories and the 2 bottles had different lot numbers. The bottles would have to come from different factories. In the question of how the bottles may have been adulterated, officials say it would have taken someone very clever, someone very sophisticated to tamper with those bottles.
Ladies and gentlemen, what's happened in Westchester and just over 3 years ago in Chicago
is an act of terrorism, pure and simple.
Johnson & Johnson has already halted production of all Tylenol capsules. It's asking stores to take them off the shelves. It is increasing production of these, tablets and caplets, which they assert are tamper-proof since they are made in the solid form. They say it would be impossible to adulterate them without destroying the product. The chairman also says public reaction will help determine whether they ever make Tylenol capsules again.
Possible you might have to withdraw it permanently?
Yes, I think it's possible. I think the consumer is going to tell us that, by the way. And I don't really think there's an awful lot we can or should do to try to change the consumer's attitude in that regard.
Preliminary consumer reaction is beginning to trickle in on the basis of preliminary findings of random surveys being conducted by Johnson & Johnson. They know this much about what the public thinks on this whole thing so far, that most of the people questioned feel it is a local problem confined to the New York area. But even so, a significant number of people, as many as a little more than a third actually, question whether they will ever buy the capsules again, and not only the capsules, but whether or not they will actually buy the caplets or tablets again. 1/4 said they didn't know. And those are two items that are not being taken off of the shelves. That's it from here right now, Roland. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, Roseanne. After the first tainted Tylenol scare in 1982, the makers of the painkiller began selling their product with special plastic seals. But you may be alarmed to learn how simple it is to duplicate that seal. A Manhattan hobby shop worker today demonstrated for our camera how plastic used in repairing models can also be used to seal a pill bottle.
Again, with a little bit of patience around it, it could be sealed down perfectly well, that no one would know that it wasn't done from the manufacturer. Especially if it was done in red.
The makers of Tylenol warn users to carefully check the safety seals on the bottles, which say Tylenol Safety Seal. Any bottle with a plain red seal should not be used.
After this week's Tylenol contamination here in the New York area, authorities in Chicago have reactivated the task force from the 1982 Tylenol poisonings of 7 people in the Chicago area. They have not ruled out a possible connection with James Lewis, convicted of trying to extort $1 million from the manufacturers of Tylenol. The FBI has been checking on Lewis's wife, who lives in Boston, and was once fired by Johnson & Johnson, the makers of Tylenol. But so far, there is no evidence Lewis is involved in this case.
I didn't say that I didn't think there was no connection. I said there's no evidence. I'm paid not to guess. And we are trying to do whatever we can to determine if there is a connection.
Chicago officials are tapping their computer records from their 18-month investigation of the 1982 Tylenol case and giving all of that information to New York authorities.
You cannot buy Tylenol capsules in the tri-state area tonight. All bottles were yanked off the shelves today, and Connecticut and New Jersey joined New York in a total ban on sales. A total of 8 states have now banned the sale of Tylenol capsules. As our team coverage of the story continues, Chris Borgen went out to see that if that ban is being enforced.
It wasn't search and destroy, it was search and remove. Mac Habib and more than 125 other city inspectors on the prowl looking for Tylenol capsules. Yesterday, the capsules were ordered from the shelves by Governor Cuomo. But this morning, it didn't take long for the health department's Habib to find an offender. At first, store manager Isaac Saba insisted all had been removed, claiming he had even beaten the gun on compliance.
You took all the capsules out before they asked, is that the idea?
Yeah, we took them about 3 days ago.
But Habib's eyeball inspection proved otherwise. There on the shelf stood about 50 restricted packages.
So what will you do with this, sir?
I'm gonna remove it and keep them in a safe after I count how many, and we'll keep it inside in a secure place.
Sorry about that, replied Saba. It must have been an employee slip-up.
The news yesterday, they're saying only in one place they found it, and maybe it's one lunatic guy, he put it, and that's it. So the girl, she put them back yesterday night.
Elsewhere, Habib's mission turned up no new suspects. At another store, in fact, the concerned manager had dumped his own personal Tylenol supply into his office trash can.
You took them all off the shelves, down the basement, and what did you do?
I'm gonna bring it back to the company.
You sealed them?
I tried to get the money back from them.
As Habib continued his rounds, consumers viewed this latest Tylenol scare with a wary eye.
No, God forbid. I would throw out the capsules.
You wouldn't use a capsule?
No, never the capsules. That's being foolish. But the other little things, they call them Capulets.
No, Monica, the Capulets were the stuff of Romeo and Juliet. You meant Caplets, but nobody's perfect. Chris Borgen, Channel 2 News.
Perhaps the people most affected by the Tylenol ban are the elderly. They're among the biggest users of that drug and seem to have the most questions about what to do now. Richard Brown looks at the impact of the Tylenol problem on the elderly.
The most common complaint among the elderly is pain, and for many the solution is Tylenol. But now some don't know what to do.
I think a lot of people are afraid to take anything.
It's frightening the public so much that they stop taking medicine, the way I look at it too. Because they're drilling it into you so much, they scare the people.
For many who have to use painkillers, they have come to trust whatever their doctors have prescribed, and a change in drugs is very upsetting.
It's confusing in that I haven't spoken with my doctor yet about what I might substitute or use instead.
I don't take capsules, and since I keep hearing that it's perfectly all right to use the pills, the regular pills, I'm not concerned at the moment. Of course, I'm listening to everything that goes on.
At the Jewish Home and Hospital in Manhattan, they have stopped using Tylenol. And according to doctors, there are alternatives.
Utilize buffered aspirin. If one wanted to avoid the aspirin route because of stomach upset and indigestion, simply walk into your pharmacist and ask for a Tylenol substitute.
Physicians point out there is no need for fear. If you are taking Tylenol capsules, you should stop and call your doctor. Richard Brown, Channel 2 News, Manhattan.
If you need a painkiller, there are many alternatives to Tylenol that can be purchased over the counter. Here with a rundown on some of your options is a member of our health and science team, Dr. Peter Salgo.
Jim, as you mentioned, people all over the city today were looking for just that. They were looking for Tylenol alternatives, and they found they didn't have to look too far to find them.
At the Bellevue Pediatric Clinic today, mothers who had been told to avoid giving their children aspirin already knew that Tylenol wasn't the only capsule containing acetaminophen, the medication they were looking for. There were others.
Tempra. Other manufacturers do make acetaminophen products, and that's perfect. That's their option to choose another brand of acetaminophen.
For anyone looking for a Tylenol alternative today, the city's pharmacies were well stocked. Pharmacist Jim Borello found most of his customers knew just what they were looking for.
Because I think they're pretty informed about it from last time. They know some of the products from last time.
Shoppers could find generic acetaminophen on the shelves, or they could buy it as Daytril, Anacin 3, Tempra drops for children, and St. Joseph's aspirin-free drops. There was Panadol and Percogesic, although Percogesic contains other ingredients in addition to acetaminophen.
And that list is by no means complete. You should talk to your pharmacist about it. And there are other options as well. If you are looking for another source of non-aspirin pain reliever instead of acetaminophen, you might think of ibuprofen. It's marketed as Nuprin and as Advil. Now, one word of caution. Before you try these drugs, be sure and check with your doctor, because these drugs have many of the same side effects that aspirin does. Often people who are using acetaminophen because aspirin has side effects don't do very well with these two ibuprofen drugs that may not be right for you. That's the time to talk to your doctor.
Psychologically, Dr. Salgo, though, it attacks our vulnerability, doesn't it?
Oh, I think it certainly does. I think there's really no problem here when you think about it objectively in finding acetaminophen. I think the problem is really, if you can't trust Tylenol, despite 3 package protections, what can you trust on the counter?
TV. This is News 4 New York with Chuck Scarborough and Pat Harper.
Good evening. More states ban Tylenol capsules while extortionists try to strike it rich from death and terror. And the maker of Tylenol puts a $100,000 price on the head of the person who poisoned some of its capsules.
It is raw reality. A second batch of poisoned Tylenol capsules are found before they can kill, and investigators don't know if any more are out there. Wasting no time, blackmailers who apparently had nothing to do with the poisoning demand $2 million as the price for sparing more lives. The new cyanide-laced capsules were discovered in a Woolworths in Bronxville, just a few blocks from the A&P. It was the source of the Tylenol capsules that killed a young woman. Connie Collins is at that Woolworths for us right now. Connie?
Yes, Chuck, and FBI officials were here all day today questioning employees at this Woolworths store. Of course, this is the store where the FDA yesterday uncovered more tainted Tylenol. And also yesterday, just a couple of blocks from here, the Bronxville police received a letter, a copy of a letter addressed to them and the Yonkers police. The sender had written a most frightening scenario. The letter writer identified himself as the Tylenol killer #2 and demanded $2 million or he would continue to kill.
He wanted $2 million within 72 hours, or he'd continue on with killing this type of crime, but would instill it into the orange juice.
He was going to put it into orange juice?
Case of orange juice, somewhere in Westchester County or in the state.
Federal agents investigating a credit card scam found the original letter at this New Rochelle home. 21-year-old Dwight Gilmore admitted writing the letter. He and 2 others were arrested but not charged with extortion. Bronxville police think the letter is a fraud, but
I don't think at this time this man is this particular individual is a suspect in the murder or the Tylenol adulteration.
But that's not being eliminated.
No, I would say not. I don't think in this business that you eliminate anything.
Last night, the FDA said that the protective seals on the second bottle of tainted capsules found at this Bronxville Woolworth appeared intact. Today, however, the agency was calling it a case of sophisticated tampering.
The most plausible, and I underline most at this time, plausible explanation is it was a tampering somewheres in the vicinity.
The FDA also says the cyanide in both the A&P bottle and the Woolworth bottle are chemically the same. The county DA, however, is not discounting any theory, including one that would point to tampering at the level of manufacture. This, even though one bottle was supposedly manufactured in Pennsylvania and the other in Puerto Rico.
I am advised by the investigators in the case that they have information which would support the possibility that the second bottle, the Woolworth bottle, while having a lot number which was assigned by Johnson & Johnson to Puerto Rico, could have been manufactured in Pennsylvania. So that possibility is still being checked out.
A third suspect bottle found in Shrub Oak in northern Westchester last night and thought to contain cyanide has now been declared a false alarm by the Food and Drug Administration. This is Connie Collins reporting live from Bronxville. Now back to Pat and Chuck.
All right, Connie, thank you. Pat?
Well, as we mentioned, Johnson & Johnson is offering that $100,000 reward for the arrest and conviction of the person who put cyanide in Tylenol capsules. The corporation's chairman made that announcement at a news conference in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and Gloria Rojas was there.
One bottle of poison Tylenol capsules and the death of one woman added up to an isolated incident, according to Johnson & Johnson. Today, investigators have in hand 2 bottles of poisoned capsules, and Johnson & Johnson is now calling it a local incident. The new bottle was contaminated by the same kind of cyanide found in the fatal bottle. It came from the shelves of a Bronxville store just a block away from where the poisoned capsules that killed Diane Ellsroth were bought. A third suspicious bottle proved not dangerous. While both contaminated bottles ended up in Bronxville, company officials say they were manufactured far apart.
The 2 bottles, both in packages of 24 extra-strength capsules, were manufactured in 2 separate plants at Pennsylvania and Puerto Rico and at different times. With the packaging of the first bottle completed on May 17, 1985 in Pennsylvania, and on the second bottle on July 17, 1985 in Puerto Rico.
Company officials discount tampering at the manufacturing plants because of the odds against both such bottles ending up in Bronxville.
The chances of those 2 bottles going through a production and distribution system through 38 states in the United States and ending up a block and a half apart, I think your own arithmetic says it just doesn't seem very possible.
Yes. Chairman James Burke was critical of the local television media in this crisis, claiming coverage needlessly alarmed the public.
I think the local broadcast media has turned this thing into a circus. And I don't think you're doing the public any good, and I don't think you're doing yourselves any good.
Gloria Rojas, News 4, New Brunswick.
Well, Johnson & Johnson is giving refunds or Tylenol tablets or caplets to anyone who returns Tylenol capsules.
But because of today's developments, more states, including New Jersey, joined in banning the sale of extra-strength Tylenol capsules. A total of 12 states, plus the District of Columbia, now prohibit the medicine's sale. The ban against the drug was issued yesterday in New York, and in Manhattan today, health department inspectors visited stores checking retailers for compliance with that ban. Among the shops visited, drugstores and discount places along 14th Street. Most merchants have already pulled that drug from their shelves, and the city health commissioner warned there would be penalties for those in violation.
We won't take any action the first time. We will pay a second visit, and if on the second visit the product still is on the shelf, that subjects the shopkeeper to a fine of $500.
Well, random spot checks will continue in New York to make sure retailers comply with the Tylenol capsule ban.
Were the cyanide capsules the work of a homicidal maniac bent on random murder? Well, that nightmarish idea seems a real possibility at this stage of the mystery, partly because no other logical explanation has turned up so far. Mike Taibbi reports.
Despite rigorous and improved packaging standards since the 1982 Tylenol murders, even the makers of Tylenol concede no packaging is tamper-proof. But there is significant evidence that the poison capsules from the 2 bottles recovered thus far were tampered with locally. The 2 bottles came from different factories in Pennsylvania and Puerto Rico and had different expiration dates. The cyanide compound in both bottles was the same, indicating it came from a single source. Since cyanide quickly breaks down the gelatin capsules, the guess is it could not have been in the capsules for more than 10 days. And of course, so far, the cyanide-laced capsules have only been found in the town of Bronxville. And finally, the capsules themselves seem to have been tampered with outside the factory. The Tylenol name logo is misaligned on the contaminated pills. All of which leads to the question, could someone outside the factory have done all that tampering and effectively disguised it? The answer, quite obviously, is yes. The fact is, someone with criminal intent and a little bit of time and money could do a reasonably persuasive job of resealing an open bottle of Tylenol, especially since few people bother to carefully check each new bottle of medication they use.
Fit it to the top and hold it down.
Hobby store owner Bob Calandra says he frightened himself this morning when he pulled some material off his own shelves to see how easy it would be to reseal a Tylenol bottle. With an iron, a hairdryer, and some commonly available synthetic sealing material, he produced a reasonable facsimile of Tylenol's double seal. Using material of the right color and composition and adding the right markings, a Tylenol terrorist could fool any but the most vigilant consumer.
Anybody could do it. Anybody can do it. If you can iron a shirt, you can do this process.
And make it look pretty authentic.
Very authentic.
And if there is a Tylenol terrorist, learning his psychological profile could be a key to finding him or her.
I think we have something that is comparable to the Son of Sam a few years ago. I think we have a full-blown, paranoid, delusional system, very, very disturbed. Probably the end product of a whole lifetime of sickness. They were hurt, and now they're going to get their revenge. And their entire awareness is focused on this. They're very involved with it. They're very careful about it. They're not the usual disheveled kind of maniac killer that sometimes we think of. They're much more careful. I think they know they're like a stalked animal, and they're making sure not to give themselves away.
So what it comes down to is that a killer of distinctive and chilling malice would require very little in the way of expertise and could look like anybody. Mike Taibbi, News 4, New York.
Kramer said the target could be a family member who patronizes the stores involved, the drug company, or just nobody in particular.
Well, it was in Illinois back in October of 1982 that 7 people died from cyanide-laced Tylenol, and James Lewis and his wife were picked up in an extortion plot against Johnson & Johnson. Lewis drew a prison term, but nobody was ever charged in those 7 murders in Chicago. Now, the 2 top Tylenol investigators in Illinois are beefing up their probe. They want to see if there's any kind of a link between the New York poisonings and those in the Chicago area. They are in daily contact with New York authorities and federal lawmen. Paul Hogan reported on the Illinois desk for WMAQ, our sister station in Chicago, and he is in New York with more on that part of the story.
James Lewis has been considered a prime suspect in the Chicago Tylenol murders since the crimes were committed over 3 years ago. First, because he wrote an extortion letter to Johnson & Johnson demanding $1 million to stop the poisonings. And second, because he told federal investigators after his arrest that he thought he knew how the killer loaded Tylenol capsules with cyanide. Since his conviction, Lewis has been held in the federal lockup in Chicago. Though his wife, Leanne, was arrested with him when they were found hiding out in a New York transient hotel, she was never charged with the extortion. But in their months of living underground here in New York, James and Leanne Lewis became quite familiar with this city. So it's logical that the FBI and Illinois State Tylenol murder investigators would show continuing interest in Mrs. Lewis's whereabouts, especially after more poison capsules were found here this week. Tuesday, FBI agents went to Leanne Lewis's neighborhood in Boston and talked with people who knew her. Only 4 months ago, Illinois Inspector General Jeremy Margolis flew to Boston with an FBI agent to try to interview Mrs. Lewis about the still unsolved Chicago murders. In Chicago today, her lawyer confirmed that the FBI called him again this week, seeking to interview Mrs. Lewis about the latest Tylenol murder.
And he said he wanted to have all of the suspicion of her as responsible for the latest Tylenol deaths put to rest.
In a telephone interview from his jail cell today, Lewis denied any knowledge of the latest Tylenol murder. "I've heard only bits and pieces about what's happening," Lewis said, "because they're holding me in solitary confinement." Contacted by phone last night in Boston, Leanne Lewis said, "I have nothing to say to the press." Paul Hogan, News 4 New York.
James Lewis is serving 20 years in jail.
Wall Street responded strongly to the Tylenol scare, and the reaction means trouble for Johnson & Johnson, as Mary Civillo reports.
I just want to let you know that Dave Lawson has changed his rating on J&J from a 3 to a 4 today.
On trading floors across the country today, it was another bad day for Johnson & Johnson, a firm still reeling from the blow earlier this week. Many investors couldn't dump the stock fast enough when the death of a young Peekskill, New York woman was traced to cyanide-tainted Tylenol, a tragedy all too reminiscent of the string of deaths caused by poisoned Tylenol capsules in 1982.
After the news on Tuesday, Johnson & Johnson stock dropped 6%. By Wednesday, though, it had fully recovered, an isolated incident, investors thought. But with news of more poison Tylenol yesterday, this morning the stock had dropped 12%, twice as far as Tuesday. And analysts here now say they don't think it'll bounce back as quickly.
Once you've had a second one at this stage, people, I think, are now psychologically prepared perhaps for a third or a fourth or any series thereafter.
Lotson's firm changed its advice on buying the Johnson & Johnson stock from neutral to unattractive. Analysts are concerned that the poisoning of the Tylenol capsules will poison the Tylenol trademark as a whole. For Johnson & Johnson, that would be bitter medicine. It is considered the firm's single most important product. Of Johnson & Johnson's $600 million in profits last year, $108 million came from Tylenol.
Do you think that it's just the capsules, or do you think it's all Tylenol?
Well, it could be all of them. Right now, we just know that it's the capsules, but who's to say that there isn't on the little white one?
But Johnson & Johnson's chairman today said their research so far tells them not to discontinue or recall the capsule, a form many consumers find the easiest to take.
It may very well be, as it was the last time, that an explanation will occur here that will encourage not only us, but the consumers to want us to continue to market the capsule.
But analysts like Lawson say more drastic measures may be necessary.
I think the odds are very high the company is going to be forced to suspend sale of capsule form Tylenol and very likely recall all existing product of that form that's currently in the market.
But Lawson agrees with Johnson & Johnson that the ultimate decisions will depend on the consumer. Mary Civillo, News 4 New York.
After the Tylenol deaths in Illinois, the drug industry and the federal government formed a committee to figure out how to make bottles safe from tampering. Well, now that committee will reconvene to see what more can be done.
Stories tonight, the big reward to solve the Tylenol terrorism, how tamper-resistant packages can be tampered with, then resealed. Up to a half a foot of snow expected by tomorrow. The Giant's Lawrence Taylor reportedly has used drugs and sexy underwear for a romantic Valentine's Day night.
This is the Independent News on Channel 11 with Brad Holbrook and Sheila Steinbeck.
Good evening. The Tylenol poisonings are being called an act of terrorism.
This comes as many states across the country, including New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, have banned the sale of Tylenol capsules. As Alec Roberts reports, Johnson & Johnson has asked Tylenol consumers all over to stop taking the capsules until further notice.
Ladies and gentlemen, what's happened in Westchester and just over 3 years ago in Chicago is an act of terrorism. Pure and simple.
The chairman of the board of Johnson & Johnson today offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person or persons who killed 23-year-old Diane Ellsroth. The Westchester County woman died Saturday after taking 2 cyanide-laced extra-strength Tylenol capsules.
Capsule container medications are not the only consumable products that are at risk. The safety of all manner of food products is threatened as well.
Yesterday, a second bottle of contaminated Tylenol was discovered at a store less than 2 blocks from where the Ellsworth package was purchased. Although the FDA has warned consumers nationwide not to take any Tylenol in capsule form, investigators still believe the cyanide was introduced after the pills left the factory. But here in Westchester County, the man in charge of the homicide investigation believes that the tampering occurred during the manufacturing process. Westchester County DA Carl Vergari says he's been advised by Illinois authorities that the potassium cyanide doesn't necessarily eat through the gelatin of the capsules within 8 to 10 days, as the FDA has been saying. In fact, he says Chicago investigators have contaminated capsules from 1982 that are still intact.
On the basis of evidence, the FBI laboratories tell us that they're able to determine with a reasonable degree of certainty whether or not a seal has been tampered with, and their laboratory examination has indicated that they were not tampered with after manufacture in both cases.
But if that were true, then how do you explain the fact that the Ellsworth bottle was manufactured in Pennsylvania and the Woolworth bottle was manufactured in Puerto Rico?
Well, it would appear to be that way. I am told that it is possible in some way in the manufacturing process for a bottle of Tylenol, these capsules, to be produced at the Pennsylvania plant and yet contain a Puerto Rican number.
But Johnson & Johnson denies it. Meanwhile, here in New York City, inspectors are going store to store to make sure Tylenol capsules have been removed from the shelves. Any store found to be selling the capsules will get a warning. The second time, they'll get a $500 fine. And in another development, 3 people have been arrested for an extortion letter demanding $2 million and claiming responsibility for the poisoning. However, police have discounted those suspects as extortionists and not the murderers. Fred?
Thank you, Alec. Meantime, Governor Mario Cuomo is asking all Tylenol consumers in Westchester to send Tylenol capsules and the packaging they came in to Johnson & Johnson so they can be examined. The address is Tylenol Exchange, Post Office Box 2000, Maple Plain, Minnesota, 55348. The company says if you do send the product back, you can collect either a full cash refund or coupons for Tylenol tablets.
After the first Tylenol murders back in 1982, Johnson & Johnson began triple safety sealing bottles of Tylenol. But obviously, this safety measure was not enough to deter whoever poisoned the most recent capsules. Now, whoever put the cyanide there was able to make it appear as if the safety seals were intact. Ed Miller takes a look at just how safe safety seals make a product.
There are dozens of different types of safety seals, all designed to make medicines tamper-resistant. Specially designed plastic tapes or caps that must be broken before you can get inside. Some of the bottles are covered with a metal foil, laminated with plastic. Some double or triple sealed. Others containers within containers. But just how tamper-resistant are these?
Thank you very much, sir.
Myron Kaner has been a pharmacist in Queens for 38 years, and he tells me some of the seals are easy to break.
These seals can be reproduced, or they can be made to go back on, and somebody bent on doing something awful can do it. If a person is of a mind to cause terror, they're going to do it.
This particular seal is called a wet seal. As you can clearly see, hot water allows the seal to be slid off and can then be put back on without leaving a trace of tampering. Once it dries, it shrinks back tightly around the cap. Other seals can be taken off and then resealed with an electric heat sealing machine, similar to the kind that seals plastic around many fresh vegetables.
If someone is able to get inside a bottle with a safety seal, what about the poison itself? Well, in the case of cyanide, cyanide is available. It is used by jewelers and photographers. It is also used as an insecticide and for electroplating. Many other poisons are also available, many of them sold right over the counter in hardware stores.
Cyanide's not a controlled substance, and we deal mostly with controlled substances. They've sent us out today on the Tylenol as a state emergency.
Cyanide is available?
I believe it is, yes. It's an industrial chemical, and apparently can be purchased.
In the case of Tylenol, it is triple protected, including a box with glued flaps. a heat-shrunk band around the cap, and an aluminum foil laminated to the tip of the container. Still, could someone break all three seals to possibly tamper with the product?
If this was done, it's been done by somebody who is very, very bright and who has technologies that we haven't yet been able to figure out.
Johnson & Johnson adds that there is no such thing as tamper-proof. The company says you can only discourage someone from getting inside the bottle, make it hard for someone. Therefore, they prefer the phrase tamper-resistant. Sheila, Brad.
Thank you, Brad.
Caroline Ferrara was not at tonight's fundraiser. She was home studying for tomorrow night's debate with Vice President Bush in Philadelphia. Sue?
Another debate is raging over whether President Reagan, now 73, is young enough and fit enough to handle the office for 4 more years. Today, Mr. Reagan's doctor said the president is in excellent health. The president was asked if he felt tired towards the end of his debate Sunday night. His response led to a retort from Walter Mondale.
No, I wasn't tired, and with regard to the age issue and everything, if I had as much makeup on as he did, I'd look younger too.
That's the same answer Nixon gave, and he made it to Kennedy. Mr. President, the problem isn't makeup on the face, it's the makeup on those answers that gave you a problem.
The second and last Reagan-Mondale debate is set for the 21st of this month. The subject, foreign policy.
Tonight, a Methodist minister is the latest person charged with sexual abuse in a Bronx daycare center. The Reverend Nathaniel Grady rented space in his church to the Westchester Tremont Daycare Center. Tonight, he's facing 42 counts of rape, sodomy, and sex abuse. The Bronx DA says 6 children, aged 3 and 4, filed complaints against him. Grady is free tonight on $25,000 bail, pending a court appearance on Friday. He pleaded innocent to the charges.
On the east side of Manhattan tonight, a bitter tenants-landlord dispute is raging over a construction job that may force the evacuation of the building. At issue, a bizarre plan to build a driveway through the first floor of this 4-story walk-up on East 78th Street. Demolition was halted this evening and inspectors called in when a crack was spotted on the front of the building. Outraged tenants accused the landlord of trying to drive them out.
He came in, began work on this apartment, even though he had not been given permission to do so by the Department of Buildings.
We have full authority by the city. We are well within our rights. We have all the permits that we need.
We're not even sure if that permit was the actual permit for the construction work. It could have been a permit for anything, for all I know.
Certainly here to protect the rights of the tenants, the main thing being the tenant safety.
If you're thinking of tenant safety, you wouldn't do this while there were tenants in there. What's the matter with you?
Well, at this hour, tenants of 403 East 78th Street are under temporary orders to vacate the building. They're awaiting a city inspector's final determination on the building's safety.
Tonight, a man was killed in a collision between a car and a fire truck in Queens. The accident at Union Turnpike and Hollis Boulevard injured 6 firemen, one of them seriously. The man driving the car was killed. The injured were taken to Booth Memorial Hospital. And tonight, some other firefighters found they were not seriously injured in a fire at Grand Central yesterday. As Dave Marish explains in tonight's cover story, it's not the flames, but deadly chemicals they're worried about.
Chuck, you may remember a well-known movie scene of recent times. Remember that gripping scene in the movie Silkwood? Meryl Streep as Karen Silkwood stripped and scrubbed down in a hot shower because it was feared that she had been exposed to nuclear radiation? Yesterday on East 38th Street in Manhattan, virtually the same scene was replayed 28 times at the fire department's engine company 21. One after another, 28 city firefighters stripped and showered and hoped they had gotten away clean from a possible exposure to PCBs. Today, Mayor Koch held a news conference to assure everyone that PCB exposure in this fire had been minimal and almost certainly not dangerous. But the 5 hours of fear felt by the 28th firefighter who had to wait to use the single shower available at Engine 21 can't be scrubbed up so easily. Whenever we hear transformer fire, one firefighter told me, we think PCBs, which is good thinking because as yesterday's event showed, even when the transformer has been retrofitted with cooling oil without PCBs, some of the PCBs can stay behind. Enough in this case to have caused a considerable leak near where the fire occurred. According to city officials this time, it didn't matter because the PCBs did not ignite and neither dioxins nor dibenzofurans were given off in smoke. The place with the most transformers in this town is Con Edison. And spokespeople at the utility told me they have a triple-check system to make sure the fire department is alerted in advance to any potential PCB hazard. A complete record of where PCBs are in our system, Con Ed says, is on file with the fire department and is kept by Con Ed's own emergency foreman and is part of the institutional memory created by annual safety exercises at every affected Con Ed workplace. Still, as the firefighters union charged yesterday and as Con Ed officials admitted to me, that system doesn't always work perfectly in an emergency. And furthermore, Con Ed ain't the only one with PCBs on the premises. The city itself has some. And according to a fire department source, they're still working on providing the department with an up-to-date list of locations. And other firms do no more than federal law requires. They put a warning label on any item that might be tainted with PCBs. But that label might easily be missed in the heat and smoke of a fire. And besides, the time for firefighters to know they may be facing toxic substances like PCBs is not when they're surrounded by flames, but before they leave the firehouse.